Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast, where we elevate marketing leaders inside and out. I'm your host, Veronica Romney, master marketer, executive leader, and mentor to ambitious marketing leaders wanting to advance their careers. Each episode is filled with genuine, unscripted conversations with some of the world's top marketing experts, accomplished leaders, and industry trailblazers representing brands, both large and small. Our goal with this podcast and everything we do is to help you master your role, nurture your team, prioritize your well-being, and evolve into an industry-leading Rainmaker. This is the Rainmaker Podcast. Welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast. We have a very, very special episode today. Quite frankly, I don't know how this is going to go. This might, in fact, go down in history as my most edited episode of all time because I have a very special guest. It is my husband. And we've already struggled to get this started. We were recording from my office at the house. We had just come home from church. We're like better now than ever. And I actually really wanted to get him on the podcast. There's so many podcast episodes we could do together. We could talk about our story. We could talk about what it's like for him being married to an entrepreneur. We can talk about how we actually tried to work together for a period of time and the highs and lows of that. That's a whole story in and of itself. But I actually wanted to bring him on the podcast because of the timing. So my husband, Scott, recently just got promoted at his company after several years working there. And it was certainly a gauntlet experience. And I thought it'd be a really cool story to share what it was like behind the scenes between the two of us as a married couple, watching him go up for a significant promotion in his organization when I try to help marketers every single day make more money so their companies can make more money from their marketing efforts. So I coerced him, begged him politely if he would like to come on the podcast and share his story. And he's told me multiple times, I don't know what you're going to ask. And so there's some trepidation. But Scott, welcome to the Rainmaker Podcast for the very first time.
Yeah, maybe the last time.
No.
First, I think it would be best to say Happy International Women's Day.
Okay.
It's awesome to work with you, to see you thrive and rock and roll in what you love to do. So,
are you being serious?
Yeah, I am being serious.
It's really sweet because we're recording this after that day, but I appreciate the gesture.
I know. I didn't want to forget to give a shout out, especially to all the
ladies,
to the women out there that represent and do well, and let alone to be married to a Latina.
Okay. How long have we been married? We'll turn this year.
You caught me there.
I know.
I was about to say 15 years, but
I think it is 15 years in November. Side tangent. Scott and I have the exact similar love languages. And so neither one of us gifts are not on the list. So anniversaries aren't that stressful because we've already forgotten 2 of the last 15. So anyways, I do think we're turning 15 years. Okay. So this isn't about me and our marriage, although I'm sure we could always do that story. That's always fun. But I want to talk to you about you and how proud I am of you in this very recent promotion. So tell people, because they don't know, they know what it is that I do. Tell people what you do for who you do it for.
So I work for a MarTech SaaS company named SOCi, and I've been there for the last almost 4.5 years. Came in originally as an individual contributor on the sales side. And then beginning of last year was promoted to a frontline manager role. So a manager of people. Mm-hmm. And then here just recently, I want to say at the beginning of February is when was extended and accepted the official role of VP of the commercial sales division. So manager of managers now. And
leader of leaders.
Yeah. And working with a handful of awesome individuals. So.
Yeah. Okay. So also for those who've listened to previous episodes, actually Monica Ho is the chief marketing officer at his organization called SOCi. She's been on the podcast before. Her podcast episode is actually one of our most popular podcast episodes on the changing nature of CMOs. And obviously sales and marketing are like very close relatives inside of a company organization. My husband is a sales individual. I am a marketing. I identify as a marketer. He identifies as a salesperson. And so let's start with that. How would you compare and contrast the difference between my specialty, my expertise versus what you do? Because we both make money for companies.
Oh yeah. I think it's a true partnership. One of the highlights of working with marketers that also understands, and not just understanding from a pontificating perspective, but really empathetically understand both sides of that hat, brings a far much better alignment when it comes to driving the right type of revenue too, because there's, especially in today's world, we're looking for those efficiencies in bringing in clients and working with them for long periods of time. And
yeah, we both make it rain. We both generate sales for organizations, but it's like, and we have to work together to do it. Because I know when I used to work in a corporate marketing environment, we would never want our sales reps out in the wild without like having approved their PowerPoint presentations and like the things they were sharing, the assets they were using. Like part of the marketing department's responsibilities was like brand guardianship. We try to make sure that like everything came out that was like tidied up. But also we would work really closely with our sales individuals because they would be the ones informing us of what they were lacking in support or assets that they would need to be successful. So like our job was to give them, the weapons of choice to like bring home the hunt, so to speak. So we work really, really well together. And then of course, when any two departments or groups work together, there's always like a really constructive and healthy tension too. How often do you work with marketing team members inside of SOCi on a weekly, monthly basis?
Oh, weekly. Oh yeah. Working weekly and having good meetings, productive meetings where we're talking about what we're experiencing on our side, what they're seeing from a data side, especially or inbound lead side, pipeline generation. There's a lot of collaboration and as well as a lot of strategizing on different ideas and maybe opportunities that we can create the right behaviors to go after. Because that's part of it. As you mentioned, it as sales, we're in the trenches and it's our job to come back and report and share, hey, this is additionally what we would need. This would help. This is what's not helping. This is what clients are asking for. When compared to accounting or other different professions, accounting principles and functions have been the same for the last hundreds of years. In marketing, it's pretty malleable. And I think we could all agree, at least over the last 20 years since internet, smartphones, consumer behavior, COVID, it's always changing.
Yeah. Well, and for us, it's different. Like when we like draw up an avatar profile on paper, you actually like converse with the avatar every single day.
Yeah.
So like what we do theoretically, you're doing in practicality, and it would be ridiculously unwise for anybody not to take advantage of each other's perspectives.
Always carving out that ICP, or that's what we use,
ideal
avatar client. ICP, but ideal client profile. That's an ongoing basis. The more you can really learn about who you're serving, the better you both are off.
Yeah. So what's it like being married to a marketer? It's fun at home though, because you can talk to me about work stuff and I get it. I talk about work stuff and you get it.
I am continually learning about my ICP as a husband. So yes. IWP, ideal wife profile.
Is that the nerdiest sales marketing joke? Oh my gosh. I've never even heard that. Anyways, that's new for the podcast. Okay. So let's talk about you though, because we've been together since we both got married at 22 years old. So we've literally grown up together. You were still in school when we got married, and I had just started working at ancestry.com in the marketing department. And so like we've come up in our careers and as humans and as marital partners. And so this VP position was available to you at SOCi. And like, why don't you take me back? Because I know the conversations we had privately, but like, were you excited? Were you nervous? Like what's the emotional palette of this opportunity?
Well, I think
for you,
well, coming around the end of the year last year and looking at the year to come, I could tell I was ready for more challenges. And I felt like I had laid down a proper groundwork in terms of where I wanted to go and continuing to progress and be promoted
for your career.
Yeah. And then it was ironic because when I had planned to have a very poignant and clear conversation with our new leader, Ed, setting an agenda of what I wanted to talk about, he actually beat me to the punch. And so we got on a conversation or set a meeting to talk about specifically the career path and where I wanted to go and what I was looking for. And he had talked about how they're going to be opening up this role, this VP role, and wanted to know if I would be raising my hand and if I wanted to put my name in there, of which I was excited about, ready for.
Were you nervous?
Of course. Yeah, a little nervousness. Yeah. Well, you want to make sure it's a right move. Like there's a lot going on. It's not just this decision, but it's the impact of this decision that it could have on growth, on team members, on morale, on trust, and
compensation.
Compensation. There's a lot of variables where you want to make sure you're not overly optimistic on, but you're looking at it from a really great logic and point of view that you can come in and really drive that right value.
Okay, so let me give a little bit more context. So you've been at SOCi at this point, what, 4 years?
Yeah,
Well, I
it's
mean,
almost
long.
4.5 years.
Yeah. So you've already clocked in 4 years. You've seen when you started at the company, you were employee number what?
I think it was like 113.
And now we're at
Oh, six,
hundreds.
700,
Yeah.
six maybe.
So you've already seen an enormous amount of accelerated growth
Mm-hmm.
and then obviously corresponding team growth changes in out part like different leaders at different times at different seasons. You are being put up for this position, a brand new position, a promoted position simultaneously while the company is also going through yet another very significant growth jump because who you mentioned, Ed, is the new chief revenue officer that they brought in because so like I'm only bringing that up because the manager that you had previously where you had built all of this managerial equity with, like you guys had rapport, you and Dan, like you and him had all this rapport. He saw your wins. He was closer in proximity and witnessing to like your leadership abilities and skills and potential. And then here comes this new person who's now your new leader who you don't have any of that history with, but now you're being considered for promotion, which like it felt, I remember we talked about this, like it felt like, oh crap, like how do I show this new person things that they didn't get to see firsthand over the last 6, 12, 18 months? Do you remember?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's interesting because there's definitely a balance of where you have to open yourself up to being vulnerable, like you're inviting them to see your thought process, you're inviting them to see how you think and how you see opportunities and where there could be improvements. And I remember, being nervous about that.
Yeah, you don't know who he's going to think. You don't have time with a brand new leader to see how they interpret or interact with other people. So then you don't really know how they're going to like judge you because you haven't seen them judge others, good or bad. I'm saying judgment not in a negative connotation, just you don't know how this person sees the world. So you don't know how they're going to see you. And now you are literally being up for promotion, which they have to make a judgment call on your ability to be a leader. Like, ugh.
Yeah. I think that's what it comes back to is when, especially in the work environment, it's important to be a contributor to the cultural side, right? Because you're not sure in the theoretical halls, because we're a 100% remote company.
Yes.
But in the halls,
Slack.
Yeah. And passing. And when others are learning about others and inquiring and passing and well-intended, you just want to make sure that you would feel confident and not overly optimistic or naive in being part of those conversations and what others would be saying about you.
Okay, let's talk about that. This is what I find really interesting about advancement, whether you're afforded the opportunity to go for a new position or you put your hat in the ring proactively. So whether you're offered a new position, like they gave it to you, like, hey, we want you to try out for VP. Would you want that? Like, you're like, yeah, I would like to be considered a contender for this like Hunger Games. Or you are more, Latina style, like how I've done in my career where like I've just sought it out or I've been very vocal about like what I want. And so like whether there was an opportunity afforded to me, I would try to like make it happen, make it so. But either way, like there is the past, like this is all that I've done to give me the confidence to even put my name in the ring one way or the other. And then there comes like a whole new like dimension of, I don't want to call it politics, but it's certainly like brand optics. Like you almost like have to be a publicist, like a politician, right? Like what do people say about me? What are the good things that others say about me? What are the things that they would say against me, or constructive feedback or even flat out criticism? Like again, you're being put up for this position with people who don't know you. So they're going to start asking your peers that have already worked with you, people that you reported to in the past, people that worked under you, people who worked horizontal to you. Like, and I remember you and I had conversations like, well, what's your coworkers going to say about you? Like, what do you think they say about you when you're not in the room? Like, what's Scott's brand equity inside of SOCi? And we had an honest conversation. Do you remember some of the things that you thought they would say about you?
Yeah. And I want to be careful here because there's two sides that I feel like a lot of professionals could hear, because there's one side, which is you can't care what others say about you.
Sure.
And then there's a different outcome, right? There's a different emotional, psychological, healthy balance to not caring what others think or say about you. But then on the other side of that coin, here you're asking me to, in that strategy session, think like, okay, like what are other people saying about me? And it has to come from a third party perspective so that you can be aware. Like, what is that branding that you're creating?
Mm-hmm.
What is that brand?
On purpose or not?
Correct. Yeah. And are you intentful in what you're building?
Yeah. So what were people saying? I remember that Scott's a really good guy.
Well, I'm known as, nice.
Uh-huh. Too nice.
Too nice. Or I think in a good conversation that I had with a peer, they were referencing saying, are you too nice that you're like a doormat, right? Mm-hmm. Or are you enough, or can you be nice, but in terms of being assertive with your direction, and can you have crucial conversations as a nice person? Yeah. Which was kind of the dichotomy of a double-edged sword to say you're too nice, but then the concern would come up from a branding perspective. Well, if they're too nice, can they have a crucial conversation to hold team members accountable? Yeah. Especially on the sales side, that's accountability in high performance teams is essential.
Making really hard choices. Like if somebody, despite you loving them or caring about them deeply, if they're not performing because you are in a sales function, like performance is king, so to speak, right?
Yep. My good sales coach that I've had for many years, he referenced something of that nature where you love your team.
Donald Kelly.
Donald Kelly, yeah.
Who's, by the way, Donald Kelly's also been on the podcast. So he's in like the first 4 episodes, by the way.
Yeah, great friend and coach over the last several years. And he said, love your team, but love you more. Right? You got to love your team. But when it comes down to the lack of their performance, if they're not performing, they need to understand that there's going to be accountability conversations and that you love yourself and your job more versus keeping them along the ride that's going to impact then leaders to look at you and question.
Yeah. And so I remember the reason that I wanted to know, because we're married, obviously, and we converse all the time about what's happening in his work life and my work life. And we share those things as a couple. But knowing that you were kind of up for this promotion, I'm like, Scott, we need to really understand what people are saying about you, because good or bad, which everyone will have both. You'll never have all good ever in your career. That's okay.
And it is okay.
I know, but that's hard because I think all of us would like to be pizza, where everybody loves pizza, but we are not pizza personalities. People will love us and people will be scared of us, and people you'll have the whole range, the spectrum, right? But I wanted to understand what people would say about you in almost like a 360 review, because for a fact that when the people who have to make a decision about your promotion, when they go and ask their peers, that's the conversations that will come up. So you need to be proactive to address it when you have the interviews, when you have the meetings to basically advocate for yourself. And so not addressing what other people are saying would be very ill-advised, right?
And addressing, not defending.
Right?
Again, there's the difference there.
Good point.
The silver lining of curiosity.
Good point.
Because it's not a negative. It's an opportunity to understand where you can be better and where you can better serve your colleagues and your peers and managing up.
Well, and positioning it. Here's the thing too about career advancement. Some people are like, well, this seems kind of very chessy, like you're playing chess or it's manipulative. And I'm like, well, I think that's a negative connotation. To me, it's just really smart, intentional positioning of oneself. If you can't advocate for yourself, no one will advocate for you the way that you should for yourself. I believe that firmly when it comes to your career. And so I remember one of the things that came up for you was you're a really, really nice guy. People really enjoy working with you. No one's ever questioned your loyalty. All of those things are glowing reviews. And I can attest to those too, because I'm the one that has the real raw conversations at home. But the one thing that came up, do you remember, was you think too much, or you think, what is it? What do they would say? You think too much.
Overthinking.
You overthink. Yeah. So he thinks too much. He overthinks. He thinks in he goes to the basement floor of thinking he goes submarine level thinking, which would be perceived as either slow to act because he's overthinking, analysis paralysis. Think about the negative connotations when somebody says you overthink or you think too much, but that would be something he's probably heard that verbalized a couple different times over the last couple of years.
I've heard it my whole life, from sports to career. Don't overthink it, just do it.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because for me, I don't know what life is like.
Not to think the way I do. This is just how I think. But so here's, okay, so this could potentially be perceived as a negative, oh, the guy overthinks, and he's a sales leader, he can't overthink. But I'm hold on. We need to craft a different positioning around this overthink, because overthink can be perceived as negative, or it could be wildly advantageous if your counterpart leadership team has like a fast draw.
Mm-hmm.
Like if there's somebody on the team who's a quick start, who like quite frankly doesn't think enough, acts too quickly, makes poor choices that have negative consequences had they just slow down. And so to be partnered with somebody, or to complete a leadership team with somebody who actually does take the space to think more thoroughly before acting, would actually be an incredible asset to a well-balanced, more complete leadership team. If you could position it that way, right? Like if you can say, hey, like here are all the leaders that this new role would be engaging with and interacting with on a weekly basis to get things done for the entire company's betterment. I think because of the way that I think, because of the way that I look at the world and I perceive the world and I assess, the battleground, I'm an enormous valuable asset, because what we already have on deck is quick starts. We already have fast shooters. Like you don't actually need another one. We're not lacking that on the team. We could benefit if we actually balance the team with this ability that I have uniquely. No?
Well, of course. And then ironically, in those leadership meetings, when you are quick to draw and then you realize there's a lot of fast change coming through, then the metaphor starts to manifest itself or show face of maybe we should slow down to go faster.
Oh, that's
right.
Like
and now here comes, now here comes the idea to say, well, maybe we need to slow down to go faster in terms of the right training or getting people to catch up. And because with, it's never, I think to your point there, and what we're talking about is it's that clarity. It's that homework, it's that confidence. And when you are more clear on what it is that you want to do and the value that you really can bring, then there's that confidence. Then that's going to be seen. And you don't have to have as much imposter syndrome. I know that's been kind of a word
everybody
that's floated.
has it. Well,
to varying degrees. And
the not enough isms.
And taking that next step. And so that's, circling back to it, is in preparation for this conversation with Ed that I started writing down what I saw as opportunities for us to continue to grow, and started just to lay it out, starting to put it in a way that would make sense to me in sharing that with.
We had to talk about this.
And others. Yeah. It was kind of this, just a great, I would say, process where I just put up a deck PowerPoint, started putting my thoughts right on paper, and then as well as getting them in terms of what this would look like from a talk track. And what originally, like very, very interestingly, what was originally curious and interesting then became more and more exciting as I started to do more homework around it and assessing the role, the value, and what I would bring and how I would bring it. 'Cause it's not just the what, but it's the how, right? That's where a lot of the difference can be brought in is how you do something, not just what, but how.
Hey Rainmakers, it's Veronica, and we'll get back to today's episode. But before that, I have an exciting invitation for all of you aspiring, ambitious marketing leaders. If you are serious about advancing your career in marketing and you're looking for an expert to give you some personal insights, guidance, tips, then I'm going to invite you to schedule a free Pathway to Promotion call with me. This is a special one-on-one call with just you and me to discuss your current roadblocks in your career, your long-term aspirations and ambition, and the next best step for you and your personal promotion. Head to pathwaycall.com or click the link in my show notes to schedule your free Pathway to Promotion call. Now back to today's episode. Okay, let's talk about that. So how many mock interviews would the two of us have? Like how many times in the car we're like, okay, they're going to ask me this. How would you answer? Like how many times do you think you and I practiced, switched roles back and forth, just
dialogued,
right? Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So you and I probably, mock interviewed, practiced, dialogued, anticipated different questions. What if they ask me this? What if they ask me that? Well, what if they ask me in this way? I'm like, don't answer it that way. Let's do it this way. Like we would just kind of back and forth. So it was super authentic to you, but I'm sharing that because to reiterate the point that you're making about when you have clarity, you can have confidence. There cannot be confidence without clarity. And so it's very difficult to show up, shoulders back, neck up, if you don't have clarity of the role, your taking and undertaking of this role, what you see your value in having it and executing within the role, and like the clarity behind the questions if they were to ask you about your vision. But the reason I want to bring up the vision thing is because I think so one of the things that Scott's really good at, just so everybody understands context about Scott was way into podcasting, like listening to podcasts, reading self-development, professional development books way before I ever did. You were the one that was already like listening to Brendan Burchard, Dale Carnegie, like countless resources on his own time for his own embetterment. I'm just like the recipient of all that good work. He doesn't do it or pressure me to do it. I just literally get to be the recipient of that work. And then I finally caught up and now I do all that stuff too. But like you were already in that mode, and now here comes this promotion, and you had already worked with coaches. You'd already gone to sales conferences. You listened to sales podcasts. All of that is true. But being a sales leader over other sales leader is a new position that you haven't had. And so I think you were asking me, or you were Googling, or you were looking for even more resources because that's just your nature. And I was telling you about one of my favorite books is Bob Iger's book, A Ride of a Lifetime. Because if you haven't read the book, first of all, read the book. It's fantastic. Great stories. But the other thing that in the book, he specifically talks about how the process, it was like 45 days or months and months, I can't remember, of him just being like, it was grueling, the process of him becoming the CEO of Disney for the very first time. And so he kind of takes us behind the scenes of like what it was like for him and how much they like dragged it out. And at one point in the book, he talks about how he worked with, it was like a branding expert that had worked with politicians to help them like make their vision clear enough for people to want to get behind it and vote for them, something along those lines. So I was telling Scott, like, there's this chapter in the book. You'll really love it. See if you can find, I think it's chapter 7 or 8 or whatever, right before he goes off to to the gym in the morning, because he listens to podcasts when he's at the gym in the mornings. And tell them why that was one of your favorite things that kind of like helped you have even more clarity around your vision. Do you remember?
Well, yeah. And I think more awareness or competency just towards how this works, because it's not always a territory that you're familiar with and knowing how to navigate these circumstances, right? They're different, they're newer. And all you have to go off of, hopefully, is surrounding yourself with some resources to help you build muscle you don't have. Awareness, knowledge, competency around these motions and knowing what to avoid or what pitfalls to avoid and or that you may have to go through, and then how you can hedge that learning curve and how you can, get ahead of the new role. And that's where, between the Bob Iger and his experience and understanding, sometimes it's not that different in terms of what you go through, whether from a Disney or an SOCi or in a whatever X company. It's just a matter of having that experience that you can feel comfortable and confidently to go through with that.
Yeah. But so one of the things that Bob says in the book, that when he was working with this kind of like branding expert, because Bob was like, I have this huge list of stuff that I want to get done as a CEO, as the new CEO of Disney, like an enormous list. And the guy was like, absolutely not. He's like, any more than 3, and then you muddy and diminish the value of your vision. Keep it to 3. And so Bob was like, oh. And so he had 3 very distinct things that would like summarize his vision as the new CEO for Disney. One was to have the highest quality content, which then led him to buying Pixar from Steve Jobs, because their animation wasn't the best. It wasn't world-class anymore. It was Pixar. So they bought Pixar. His second point of vision was bringing the best quality content and distributing it in new, innovative ways so people would have more access to Disney content, which then, hello, Disney Plus. And then his big thing was like, expanding the international reach of Disney. And now that's why you see all these Disney theme parks in different marketplaces like all around the world and stuff like that. So he was like, he had this huge list of all things that he wanted to get done. And the guy was very strategic in saying, keep it to 3 core pillars of your vision. And so I remember, and I know I didn't ask you to do this you did proactively, but I remember sharing the book with you, and then you, in consuming that content, re-listening to those couple of chapters over and over again, because that's how you are. You went and created this, what you call like your vision deck. He literally went in and created this like Google Slides vision deck of how he saw this VP role of commercial sales and like what his agenda was. You know how like presidents say like, in the first 90 days, I'm going to do da-da-da. Like he kind of basically did the same thing. Like, this is my personal agenda as your new theoretical VP. And these are 3 things that I want to bring to pass in this capacity that I would be responsible for and that you can hold me accountable to. I'm pretty sure you were the only candidate that had that. And every time you showed it to all the people that were interviewing you, what was their reaction?
Oh, it was very welcoming, very affirmative. And
they were impressed.
And the what in terms of the 3 pillars, was very clear. And then again, just kind of the nuance, a little bit of these 3 pillars and the how, got some great feedback around it. And what was great too is, just to echo this, is so you had the Bob Iger book, and then as well as I had a few other friends, mentors, Matt particularly one that, that he actually shared the 3 pieces too. And then listening to the book, it was just again,
it all came together.
A confirmation of how to go about creating this vision of having 3 distinct, not less than 3, and ideally not more than 3, but type of categories or pillars, if you will, of this vision, and coming into what I would be able to bring, and making sure that what I wanted to bring is what the organization needed.
So if you do randomly, the timing of this podcast will be dropped in mid-March. I am hosting a class in March, actually March 21st, 28th, I can't remember. It will be on my website, veronicarami.com. I'm going to actually teach marketers how to write a promote me letter, basically a letter where you outline very specific intentional parts in this letter to like ask for promotion, that you're ready for promotion. And we'll also talk about like this kind of 3-part success recipe for your vision deck, because obviously being close together and going through this together behind the scenes has inspired the work that I do as well, but it's also extremely validating for all the counsel, the things that we talk about in our residency programs. And so I'm just going to share that with you guys for free if you'd like to attend. So you can check out more of that on veronicarami.com later in March, the last Thursday in March. But okay, so was there any point in your promotion experience where you were like doubting yourself? Or how did it like weigh on you?
In the beginning, it was the most, but throughout the process,
it got better.
As the confidence, because like I said, originally it was just kind of like interesting. Okay, like this is what would be great. And then it became more exciting as I continued to validate what I was hearing and seeing and doing, where I really was arrived at a point where I was like, oh my gosh, like it would be nuts not to do this, because when it comes down even to an experience, there's handfuls and dozens and hundreds of people that may have more experience, but that's not just the only optic to look at it from, where it's who's the right person. And then when you're bringing all that tribal knowledge that can help create that right velocity, you just, it just started to make, you just start to see it as they'd be nuts not to hire you. Yeah.
I mean, you're not saying that in an arrogant way. You're just saying that like you put in the work, you sat with it, you marinated on it, then you put it on paper, then you validated it, then I don't know how many people you talk to, me included, right? But like your peers, your friends, your colleagues in similar positions. As I kind of watched you have interview after interview, I could see your confidence increasing because I'm like, how'd it go? And you're like, no, they were really surprised. They were really like pleasantly surprised with this deck. And they were validating, or they gave me even more dimension that I wasn't even aware of because I'm not part of those conversations yet, that I could then add to my next interview. So like it was momentum that was building on momentum. You could see, I could watch him go from the first interview, like real nervous as you would, because, like a lot is on the line. And you want to do a great job. Like, I think there's a difference between being nervous to prove oneself versus nerves or anxiety around making sure like the movie lives up to the hype. So like there's like a proving energy, and then there's just like the energy of I want to make sure that I deliver a great performance. And so with you, I could see you go from I want to prove myself to, at the conclusion of this kind of gauntlet experience, it was like the pressure, the anxiety that you had in the later stages was more along the lines of like, I want to make sure I live up to the hype, that the movie is as good as everybody thinks the movie will be. And so that was really cool for me as your partner to kind of watch you, like, I don't know, I could tell when you come home from the gym, like the different parts, like he'd come home from the gym the first couple, days where it was like, like a lot of deep breathing and just processing. Right. And then like the next couple of days, it was like, this would be crazy. Like, I got this, I'm going to kill him. Like, yeah, like it was really cool to see that. I don't know, tempo. The momentum builds on momentum. There's no doubt.
It did. The cocktail of coming back, and I've got ideas, and I'm like, I know 9 are not probably the good ones, but one idea is really going to be amazing in this, and this is the one I come home with, and I have an idea.
Oh, yeah.
I thought of something.
I say all the time on his tombstone, it's be like, hey, love, I have an idea, ... Because that's like 15 years of this. But do you think, and I mean, obviously there's a lot of like ambitious professionals that are listening to this podcast. I think there's also people who are in leadership positions who want to promote great talent. Like, how crucial was it for you not to just carry this by yourself? Like, what would you say really got you through this experience more than anything? Because it's a lot.
Yeah. No, it is a lot. By the way, it's always a lot.
You're still doing your job.
Correct.
Like, you still have your 9 to 5. That's a fallacy. You still have your normal job that you still have to perform in while you're going through this like all consuming kind of promotion experience. And you're a father, and you have a wife and a family and responsibilities, and like, it's a lot. So how did you do it?
Yeah, one is having the right network, right? And having friends and mentors and people that you can reach out to encourage you and coach you in the right way.
Yeah.
Right. And ones that you trust, that have your best interest and have the right intent, and then also have that capability aspect. Like they've done it themselves, or, they can guide you in the right way and give you the right words, or not right words, but right advice, perspective to have on certain things that you're doing. So that would be my biggest one is whatever that you're doing, right? And you'll see it through podcasts, or you're going to see it through conferences or groups or thought leadership groups. Absolutely, I would encourage you to surround yourself within little micro influencer groups or of thought leaders where you can connect and you can learn counsel through, having a quorum of individuals that you can continue to grow with. That's the key part. If you can put yourself in a great room with great people that are smarter than you, which again, I'm sure you've heard that hundreds of times, but it's that common sense that's not always that common practice. And hearing that, just surrounding yourself with the right individuals that want to also help and that you can help. And a great mentor that Tim Wilson, who shared this many years ago, that I'll never forget, is to eat like a bird and poop like an elephant. Eating like a bird in terms of just consuming this information and learn. And then in terms of the elephant.
Tim Wilson, former VP of marketing at Office Depot.
Yes. Who led a team of like 200 people. That was their mantras. But then, as an elephant, to share it, be a broker of information. And
what a quote, though.
And it stuck with me.
No, it's memorable. Like, no one's going to remember this podcast, but they're going to remember eat like a bird, like an elephant. Like, great. Oh, good. Okay, so I guess I'll ask you my final question. And then what we do with all of our guests on the podcast is our guests get to ask me the final question. So make it appropriate. PG, thank you. My final question to you is for anybody who is listening to this podcast who is either motivated to put themselves up for an opportunity to get promoted by asking for it, or somebody who's in a position like you found yourself in not too long ago where you were offered an opportunity to be promoted, what would be, I think, your biggest advice if you had to give them one, other than like working with awesome people, I guess?
Probably along the lines, I don't know if it was Tony Robbins, I don't remember who said what or what book said what, but like the greatest ROI is just to invest in yourself. Invest in yourself. If you can dedicate 30 minutes a day to sharpening your craft, whatever that may be, through whatever modality that may be, and then the follow-up of 15 minutes of implementing what you're learning into your processes or whatever's in front of you, that's the game changer. And I've always been a big fan of high performers. So if it's Tom Brady or if it's Mahomes, and I recently learned this, and I can't remember the gal's name from Harvard who studies high performance teams, but it's 5 compliments to every one critique. Oh. And so it's just to always reinforce the good things that you're doing
for yourself and your
for
team.
yourself, for your team, for those around you. That's very specific of what is doing, what you're doing well. And then, the 5-to-1 ratio. So if you can continue to find things throughout that 30 minutes of learning, podcast, book, mentor, calls, whatever that may look like to better yourself, and then 15 minutes to follow up and implement those changes and what that looks like, I think that's
great advice. I think what I'm hearing is like intentional. There's a lot of intentionality. You will not advance in your career to the same degree if you are constantly reacting versus being intentional and proactive. And so like I will say you are a very proactive learner, intentional learner. And then like to your point that you make a point to implement it within, I mean, it's literally the same week that you learn it.
Yeah. Because there's those that read a book a week, which is great. But it's like when you mentioned it earlier, like with Bob Iger's book, chapter 7 or chapter 8, like I listened to it.
But then you did something
about, 3-ish times. But because there's a lot of wisdom and things that you can implement the second time that you go listen to that. Yeah. And so it's not just I've read 50 books this year, but what did that do for you? Yeah. What did that give you, or how did that make you better? What's your ROI? Or did that increase your satisfaction of life, or did it increase your your paycheck or, job satisfaction?
Well, I will say as your wife, I'm very happy and proud of you.
I appreciate it. Yeah.
Okay. So the final question is, I usually like to ask the guests like, hey, I just asked you a whole bunch of questions that were not scripted. You were a great sport. So it's only fair that the tables get turned and you can ask me whatever you want in reverse.
Okay. So I think you asked me this question a few days ago or maybe a week ago, but how many years have you been doing veronicaromney.com and these programs?
What, the Rainmaker residency programs? Mm-hmm. Is over 2 years now.
Okay. So what would you say are the 2 biggest nuggets of wisdom that have come from 2 years, 2 nuggets? What would those be?
From in which capacity?
I mean, yeah.
Running them as a provider or
as a business owner to your students, to your craft.
Okay, so for those that don't know, the Rainmaker residency programs, because we have 2 versions of it, is a leadership development program for marketers, ambitious marketers, what I call Rainmakers. And there's another version of the program called Rainmaker Residency Plus, which is the CEO and their marketer do it together. It's a duo-ship. So I say that because I work with a lot of Rainmakers, marketing leaders, ambitious marketing professionals who are wanting to advance their career and have better performance and all of that, right? And I will say, unlike me, so I'm a 15-year marketing person. Like my pedigree is marketing. I've never strayed from marketing. My diploma behind us as we're recording this is a diploma that says, global marketing. So I've been a marketing professional my entire career. I've never deviated. I will tell you though, some of the best Rainmakers in the program do not have marketing pedigrees whatsoever. They are former school teachers, former assistants, tech VAs, healthcare providers. I mean, you would be shocked at how diverse the backgrounds are of some of the most successful marketing leaders, marketing Rainmakers that we have. And what I've realized is that because of what I'm sharing with you, which is now my second point of whoa, I think the reason, and I'm sure you could probably see this in sales, there's certainly a difference between nature and nurture. Like we can teach people marketing. You can teach people sales mechanics and the science of selling and Sandler's training them. You can teach them good practices, sales practices, or we can teach them good marketing practices, or we can get them Google Analytics certified. We can do the nurturing of sales skill, but the nature of a really phenomenal marketing leader is more to do with who they are than what they learn. And so being a sales individual, you have to be able to handle the heat of the arena. When you are in a position to generate revenue, you will be held accountable to those results. And so there is certainly a part of you that has to handle high pressure situations, revenue expectations. There's also a part of your nature where you have to be wildly emotionally intelligent. Some of the best marketing in the entire world is just empathetic marketing, listening and repeating. And same thing in sales conversations. How many great practices where you're mirroring what they're saying, or you're reiterating what I think I heard you say is to be seen, to be heard is to sell, is to serve. And that goes true for both marketing and sales. And so some of the best Rainmakers are wildly emotional. Their emotional intelligence is through the roof. They're incredibly empathetic or even highly sensitive. And it's reflective in their copy. It's reflective in their skills to put themselves in the prospect's shoes and not just take for granted what these people are going through in their lives, to then also be offered this thing. And so it's always surprising to me how much the success behind revenue-centric positions has, to me, more to do with someone's innate nature than it does even the nurture. And then if you can take somebody whose nature is the perfect ingredients to grow, and then you nurture it, holy crap, just get out of the way. And so that's probably been the biggest observation that I've had in the 2 years that I've been running my programs is I no longer believe that you have to have this like 15-year deep marketing pedigree, even though I'm quite honestly, that's me. But you don't even have to have that to surpass me or to be one of the best marketers I've ever worked with. And that's true. And I would imagine that's probably reflected in like a sales capacity.
Yeah. I've seen a few excellent sales professionals come from being attorneys.
Yeah.
Right. Or
the unexpected backgrounds. Yeah.
Yeah. Or the military.
Well, anyways, thank you. I know you were a little bit like, oh, how's this going to go? But you did great, love. Love you.
Love you too, sweetie pie.
I can't believe we did. That concludes another incredible episode on the Rainmaker podcast. Thank you to Scott for sharing his unrehearsed, unfiltered story about his recent promotion. And we both hope that if you are somebody who is wanting more, that this episode helps you do that. So until next time, thank you. Thank you for joining us on today's Rainmaker podcast. Marketers help other marketers. So if there's a marketer in your life who could really use a new perspective in a way that helps them advance their career, please pass this episode forward, share, leave us a review. Everything helps as we embark on helping as many marketers elevate themselves inside and out. You can always visit veronicaromney.com for today's show notes, additional links to some free resources and tools for you to help you advance your career. You can always connect with us on social media at @VRomney if you want more behind the scenes or a way for us to connect personally. Until next time, my friends, make it rain.